Hi, my name is Lourdes, and I am hosting this last 60 Best 60 video series. I actually was looking back at last year, and I did a blog post at the end of the year called Finish Strong. And I've hosted or taught yoga classes on New Year's Day and New Year's Eve, and I just know that energy around the new year, and I really wanted to set up myself as well as the people in my life to finish the year strong. I don't think that the feeling is like, how do I change my life as we look at New Year's resolutions, but really like, how do I amplify my life? How do I turn this ship in the direction that I want to go? And I mean that by looking at all parts of our life, not just one area that we want to address. And it's like when the parts are working together, the engine has power. And that's how I hope that you feel as we're doing this. So today, the area we're focusing on is spiritual life. And it's actually one of my very favorite topics. I have my master's degree in theology. I cultivated my spiritual life as a young person, not even knowing what I was doing. I just knew that I really enjoyed church and I liked prayer, and I knew this personal relationship with God, not in the evangelical sense, which I think is a common way of describing like your spiritual life, but I just really knew that God was aware of me, and I had a relationship with the God that was in the mythology that I was reading about in the Catholic Church, in the Bible, in all of my religion classes. Like, I had no problems with that. In other words, like, I was all in, and I was like, give me some more. So I would just describe it looking back. Like, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to work on my spiritual life. Like, I just was in the ocean of that. And as they say, like, the fish is the last person to know that they're in water. When I ask you to rate yourself in your spiritual life, it's not, do you have a religious belief or not? It's not about that. It really look at like, what is your sense of trust in the universe, in that higher power, whatever you call God. It might also be your sense of peace, and where do you go in your mind, in your heart, in your life? Where do you go when you have worry, fears, or doubt? Because that truly is sort of like where our spiritual life needs to feel in place. And it doesn't have to be a religious place. It can be like, I go inward, I go into my meditation, I journal. And spirituality also has a component of community. It doesn't always have to be but like I was saying, I have a friend who's like-minded. She happens to be a minister, and as I said, that's not why I call her, but she is a person that I feel comfortable talking about kind of life's question, knowing that we share this deeper common knowledge of who God is for us. And so, do you have that kind of friend or community or even mentor? I have a spiritual director, coach that can really hold those kinds of spiritual questions. So consider that in your spiritual life when you're looking at this area of your life. One of the ways people have described to me is a lot of times they'll say something's missing. And so if you feel like there's like a something missing, a depth, a kind of place to question and think things through, or even a place to go to when you have fear, doubt, or worries, like that, there's a something missing that might only be described as spiritual. In the Buddhist tradition, they describe sort of a commitment to Buddhism as taking refuge. And in the image of what we're doing spiritually, we're really taking refuge in this practice that allows for some deep quieting. So that might be an image that resonates for you. And then lastly, in this area, I'm going to encourage us all to reflect on the spiritual story that you grew up with. And that could be no spiritual story or a particular religious tradition. And the reason why I think it's important to reflect on that is that at some point as an adult, like, we really need to choose for ourselves. So I describe, for me, like, the Catholic Church for me is like my mother's house. I mean, I love and respect my mom, and when I'm in her house, I respect her rules. I am respectful to her and what her traditions are. Like in our family, when we go home for the holidays, like we eat breakfast together. So if someone sleeps in late, like we're all waiting for that person to wake up. And same with dinner. Like if I'm out with friends and, but I know that they're waiting for me to have dinner. And so I have to call them and say, hey, go ahead and eat without me or whatever. Or I make plans to like go out with friends and then I come home for dinner because that's how they are. That's their tradition. And so to be able to, as an adult, come to some resolution or completion to our spiritual stories growing up is actually very healing. And that makes space for us to choose and to freely and fully express who we are spiritually as adults. So that's important work to do in this area. And either, and whether you're doing it for the first time or you're doing it again, spend some time thinking about that area, and then really like also start to be open to what's next. What does spiritual life look like in 2019? What's missing that could feel complete? What's feeling really strong and good that I want to share with people? I've had times like that where I felt really connected spiritually, and so I would just host gatherings at my house that were around the religious traditions, but not like a religious celebration. So for example, one of my favorite days of the year is Holy Thursday, which is the Thursday before Easter. And when I was growing up, I just remember that there's a special mass that happens on Thursday night in the church. And the way that the priest opened up that mass was he said, on this night, Jesus gathered with his friends. And so in most of my adult life, I've had dinners on Thursday night, and I invite 12 of the very special people in my life at that time. And so it's kind of, I don't necessarily call it the Last Supper, although that is what was happening in Jesus' time. I do spend some time thinking about 12 people who, if this were my last year, if Sunday were my last day, like who would I want at the table with me? So that's like one of my spiritual traditions that I have created for myself that comes from a lot of love of my tradition and wanting to fully and freely express my spiritual life as an adult. So it's a good day to really dive deep into who you are and spend some time thinking about that. Talk about it with your friends and see if they have ways of exploring their spirituality as adults too. Thanks.